Hello, good morning, good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Asavari Manvikar, and I volunteer. I'm a chair for CAR, Council for Ayurveda Research, which is a non-profit based out of USA, with its sister science, sister branch, which is in India called as AAAF, Ayurveda Anusandhan Abhiyan Foundation. CAR has been working many years. It's a non-profit with its mission to encourage, educate, and facilitate basic clinical as well as interdisciplinary research in Ayurveda. Please visit www.ayurvedresearchusa.org to find out more about CAR. We would love to have more participants as well as more volunteers to work for CAR. So if you are interested, please reach out to us. Let me introduce our platinum sponsor, who is Komal Herbals. Komal Herbals is a company which is based out of USA, and they create really authentic, very good organic products. If you are interested into buying any Ayurvedic products, please reach out to them. Let me introduce today's speaker, Dr. Chaitali Samant, but she is MD in Ayurveda with her specialization in Kaumara Bhritya. She is a professor, head of department of Kaumara Bhritya, Indian Institute of Ayurvedic Medicine at Bangalore. She is a member, Board of Studies in Clinical Ayurvedic Medicine from Goa University. She has been working for Vishwa Ayurved Parishad, Anusandhan, Prakoshthak, Goa State. Dr. Chaitali completed her BAMS in 2003 from Gomantak Ayurved Mahavidyalaya and Research Center with honors. Dr. Samant received her master's degree MD in Kaumara Bhritya, which is one of the 8 branches of Ayurveda, which deals with maternal as well as the child health from prestigious IPGT and RA, Jamnagar, Gujarat Ayurveda University, a Tier 1 National Ayurvedic Institute, postgraduate studies. She has been honored with gold medal for her academic excellence during her postgraduate studies. She works as a professor and HOD department for Kaumara Bhritya at Indian Institute of Ayurvedic Medicine and Research in Bangalore. She is also co-founder and chief consultant at Ayusha Ayur Care at Malleshwaram, Bangalore. Dr. Samant is an avid blogger as well as has established numerous articles as well as blogs on her blog. So please visit curaayurveda.wordpress.com. She is also one of the 10 most authors. She has worked on PCOS. So please visit cura.com, which is a leading community-based platform. And it has many, like more than 4 lakh viewers. So it will be really, great resource for you. So let me welcome Dr. Chaitali.
Hello, Asavari. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
All good, Asavari. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, so please feel free when you are ready.
Definitely. So I'll just share my screen.
Yes.
I hope the screen is visible.
Yes, absolutely.
So warm welcome and hello to everyone who is joining us live today or who will be watching this as a replay later. So today we are going to deal with a very important type of research study or a methodology of research, which is called as systematic review and meta-analysis. When we talk about medicine, we always talk about evidence-based medicine. And even in Ayurveda, we are trying to drive Ayurveda towards evidence-based medicine in its own capacity, to make it not just more acceptable across the world, but also to validate the authenticity of our science across the world. Evidence is the knowledge based on which we base our beliefs, sometimes our disbeliefs, and even our actions. But how do we know as to which type of evidence gets us closest to the truth? And what quality of evidence do we base our actions on? So today we are going to see how and why systematic review and meta-analysis is so important to get us closer to the evidence that we are always looking for, whether it is connected to, say, randomized controlled trials or any kind of medicine which is tried, any kind of efficacy of herb or any treatment modality that we use. In every such aspect, systematic review and meta-analysis is what helps us out in getting closer to that evidence and in getting closer to that truth. It all started when a philosopher, a scientist, and a mathematician in circa 16th and 17th century called René Descartes provided an important basis for this scientific method. Descartes recommended that when it is not in our hands to follow what is true, we ought to follow what is most probable. What is most probable is the best evidence that we have on a given topic. It may not be the highest quality, and its proximity to the truth may not be clear, yet it is the best we have, and we need to combine it with our clinical expertise and our judgment and act accordingly. These were the humble beginnings from where concept of systematic review and meta-analysis in research started to meet the constant demand for evidence-driven medical research. Publications in research are a very powerful tool in steering our science in the right direction, or to decide the progress of any medical science, including Ayurveda. And among all types of research studies, just a moment. I think, Asawari, the screen for some reason is frozen.
Okay.
Yeah, just a moment. Let me see.
Sure.
Stop the share and restart just to see if I can get it going. Okay.
Yep. It is such an important topic.
Yes, indeed. You see now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So amongst all types of research studies, systematic review and meta-analysis is what lies at the top of the evidence pyramid, as we call it, with all other types of research, be it in vitro research or animal trials or in vivo studies. And then you have ideas and editorials, case reports, case studies, controlled trials and cohort studies. And then we have randomized control and double-blind studies. And on the top of the evidence pyramid, we see that it is systematic reviews and meta-analysis. It is the best type of research that a person can carry out, or a team of reviewers can carry out in terms of medical research. And it is also a very important type of publication, because what happens is, when we move up the pyramid, the amount of available research that on a given topic, it decreases, but the credibility and the validity and the quality of the literature increases as we move up the pyramid, which is what makes systematic reviews and meta-analysis so important type of research. So what happens is, authors of a systematic review and meta-analysis, when it is attached to it, they ask a specific clinical question, a very specific. There are methodologies that are followed to arrive and to improve the specificity of that particular question. And it could be any problem that we are facing in clinical research, or if we want to know as to, for example, there are several research studies which are conducted about ashwagandha and its efficacy, say, for example, in improving immunity. right? So I'm just giving an example.
Mhm.
How do we know across all research studies which are conducted in various academic institutes or other research organizations across India or across the world, whether ashwagandha was found to help immunity or not? So we are trying to reduce the bias in understanding the efficacy of this drug in a particular condition. And how do we arrive at that? We can't pick up one research study and decide, oh yes, this research study said that, this randomized control trial, if it was at all done, said that ashwagandha was found to be effective. But I may have a question as to what if there was a bias involved in this, and how do I decide whether the quality of this research was up to the mark or not? Was it a highest quality research or not? In this case, what we do is we collect all possible studies which evaluate the efficacy of ashwagandha in improving immunity. And we decide on parameters, what aspect of immunity, what is going to be the test that we will evaluate as to whether ashwagandha was, they did any studies on that, were there any biochemical studies conducted on that, and what kind of study, what kind of data do we want to collect on that study? And that will be evaluated by multiple reviewers through a blind review. One reviewer would review the articles separately. They will sort through, they will go through a comprehensive search of articles, and later on do meta-analysis, which is a statistical study of the data which they extract out of all the reviews which they did, of all the accepted articles, those were included in the research, and they will arrive at a conclusion whether or not ashwagandha showed consistent results in terms of boosting immunity. The reduction of bias which is involved in systematic review and its insistence on including only the highest quality research is what makes it so valuable and top-notch methodology of any research study. So they ask the clinical question, they perform a comprehensive literature search, eliminate any poorly done studies, and attempt to make practice recommendations based on well-done studies. A meta-analysis, on the other hand, is a systematic review that combines all the data which was collected through the literature search and the data that was extracted, and it kind of combines it into a single statistical analysis or synthesis and a single statistical statement, whether or not it was significant or whether the study showed any significant results or it did not. So the knowledge which is gained, from this plethora of research studies, it is very vital for continuation of education. Many people even still ask, like, why are you people so hooked up to research? Why do you want to study research? You people are practitioners probably, or you have sound knowledge of Ayurveda. So how does research matter to you? Research studies and research articles are the core for continued education, especially in medicine, for upgradation and enhancement of our knowledge and understanding of Ayurveda, and also for ensuring its popularity. See, one of the major struggles which Ayurveda faces is credibility, especially on world stage, and a constant onslaught of attacks, about safety of Ayurveda medicines, which all of us are aware about, from all fractions of conventional medical community. For example, the 2015 case report in Center for Disease Control's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, linking usage of Ayurveda medicines to high levels of lead, and the survey studies that they conducted to show that 40% or more of Ayurveda medicines contain very high level of lead content in them. It gave Ayurveda a very bad press, and it's still giving bad press to Ayurveda. So one of the reasons, why we can't fight back, or we do not have enough ammunition backing us to fight such attacks backed by lobbies which have a strong anti-Ayurveda propaganda, is a lack of substantial body of systematic reviews and high quality RCTs, which in the era of evidence-based medicine are gold standards. Hence, in today's webinar, I will like to take an overview. See, it's delving into systematic review and meta-analysis is like trying to swim across the ocean. I'm very well aware that it may not be possible to do that in this seminar, but let's look at it just as an introduction. And I would like to encourage each and every person who is either listening live or going to listen to this webinar later, to try and understand what and why systematic reviews and meta-analysis are so important. So we will next see about what exactly is systematic review. It is a high-level overview of primary research on a particular research question that systematically identifies, then selects, evaluates, and synthesizes all high-quality research evidence which is relevant to that question in order to answer it. Systematic review and meta-analysis are considered as the highest quality evidence on a research topic because the study design reduces bias. And bias is killer of research, of any research finding. So eliminating bias is one of the core goals of systematic review. And it produces more reliable findings because the bias is eliminated. It is typically done by a group of reviewers, 2 or more reviewers, mostly 3 most of the times. You have 2 core reviewers and you have a third reviewer who is there for resolving any conflict which may arise during the review which is being conducted by 2 independent reviewers. In 2011, Institute of Medicine noted that systematic reviews can help clinicians to make good decisions in their daily practice and help organization in building guidelines. So the application of systematic review is really vast, whether it comes to policy making or it comes to training clinicians or the understanding of clinicians about any particular modality of treatment that they are going to use. It is thus a systematic and transparent method of gathering, appraising, and synthesizing evidence to answer a very well-defined question. How that question is defined and what is the process of that, we will see in the following slides. It is, it originated, this type of research originated in biomedical field, and it currently forms the basis of decision-making in evidence-based treatments, as well as evidence-based behavioral practices, EBBP as we call it. Then what is meta-analysis? Meta-analysis, as I said, is a statistical evaluation of all the data which is collected through systematic reviews. Now, as it might appear that many people use systematic reviews and meta-analysis as they are as synonyms of each other, but that's a common misconception. In fact, although there is a significant overlap between the two, they both are 2 separate aspects of research. Often done, like meta-analysis often forms the part of systematic reviews, but it is not required that every systematic review will have a meta-analysis. If your clinical question is trying to collect quantitative data and quantitative values which are being addressed through your research question, then meta-analysis is a must to arrive to an answer to your research question. However, if your study is addressing a qualitative question and you're trying to collect data which is qualitative, then meta-analysis may not always be relevant to your study. So, the statistical integration of conceptually similar quantitative studies to attain to a point estimate which is closest to truth, that is called meta-analysis. So it helps us to understand that all studies which deal with similar topics, they have a common truth between them, like how I gave example of ashwagandha used in immunity. So all those studies were trying to arrive to a truth that ashwagandha helps in boosting immunity. So when we collect data from all of these studies and when we integrate the results, a meta-analysis gives us a more accurate pool estimate. It gives us an estimate closest to the truth. That's why it is so important. To define it technically, it is a statistical process or procedure for combining numerical data from multiple separate studies that were evaluated in a systematic review. Please do understand that meta-analysis may not be applicable if you are trying to collect qualitative data. Say, for example, if your study dealt with something like traditional postnatal care according to principles of Ayurveda, and its impact on maternal emotional well-being, or its impact on prevention of postpartum depression in women. So, if you are just trying to understand the impact, then when we are evaluating impact is a very qualitative kind of assessment, and the data which you collect will be qualitative. So in that case, meta-analysis may not be applicable. So it depends on what research question you select, based on which you may or you may not do meta-analysis. Now, types of systematic reviews. There are on a broad scale, if we try to categorize systematic reviews, we can categorize them into these 8 categories. So first is systematic literature review. So how does it differ from your conventional or your classical literature review? So in systematic literature review, it is a very specific type of review that uses rigorous and transparent methods in an effort to summarize all of the available evidence with little or no bias, which may not be done in case of a non-systematic literature review or a traditional literature review, which we do. Then we have something called as umbrella review. So umbrella review, it summarizes data from multiple systematic reviews. That's why it is called as review of reviews or overview of reviews. So it evaluates different systematic reviews, and it's typically used when the researcher needs to address competing interventions in different reviews to report and highlight results. Then we have scoping review. So scoping reviews are typically done in conjunction with any other types of systematic reviews, and their intention is to determine the potential size and scope of literature available. It is also often used to predict the resource requirements. For example, how much time or funding might be needed for a research. Such kind of findings are done by doing scoping reviews. And it also helps in defining review protocols. So scoping reviews may be part of a systematic review or a part of an umbrella review when funding is required or you want to analyze how much time will be invested into a review. Then you have rapid reviews. So rapid reviews are essentially fast-tracked systematic reviews, and they are typically done by policymakers when they are crunched for time, and they have a tight time frame, and they want specific information within that time frame and they need a very quick turnaround. In such cases, a rapid review is done. Then we have qualitative reviews. So we spoke about systematic reviews in which meta-analysis may not be required or may not be applicable. In such studies, in such cases, we use qualitative reviews. So they can be called as meta-synthesis or qualitative and evidence synthesis also, because as the name suggests, it will collect qualitative data, and many a times the results may be presented in terms of descriptive or narrative approaches in terms of presenting the results. They may use tables and graphs just the way any other systematic review does, but the results and the evidence will be presented in the form of narrative approach. Then we have state-of-the-art reviews. So most systematic reviews include the entire scope of literature available on a particular topic. The state-of-the-art review generally focus on recently published literature to assess the current methods. So it'll often highlight like new ideas or gaps in research with no official quality assessment. So in that case, we use state-of-art reviews just to see what is the current development in any topic which is pertaining to our research question. Then we have mixed study reviews. See, when more than one of these 8 methods is employed in any systematic reviews, it is called as a mixed review. Now, each of these topics may require like a very long explanation, and each of them can be presented, in fact, as an independent webinar. We will just take the overview today. Then next is methodology of systematic reviews. Now, just as the name suggests, the process of systematic reviews should be well developed and planned. The design of the study needs to be planned meticulously to reduce bias and to eliminate irrelevant and low quality studies, because including such studies will only create issues in answering the research question that we had formed. Then the steps for implementing systematic review include the following steps. First one is forming a clear and well-defined research question. There are certain standardized techniques and standardized templates and tools which are used for that. We have PICOS, and we have PICO and PICOT with a T, which are used to formulate the research question. They help to narrow down and clearly formulate search terms and what is the statement of your question for you to be able to conduct a very well-defined systematic review. Then next is writing the systematic review protocol. In this, the reviewers need to define the boundaries of the systematic review with definition of inclusion and exclusion criteria, which is very important. Then systematic literature screening is searching is the next. It is recognized as one of the most critical components of systematic review process, because with the vast and growing volume of published articles which are available across various search engines and databases, it can be very it can be a very enormous work. So based on the techniques which are followed for literary search, the review question is very important, which will guide us in the search strategy. There has to be a search strategy which will be formed, and it will also help us in the conclusions we will be able to draw from the review, as it will depend on the which studies we include and which databases we have approached. Each database has their own speciality as to what kind of articles you will find there. For example, Cochrane Central has most of the systematic reviews which are published over there. And you have PubMed Central, and you have various Ayurveda based databases such as ABEAM. So for us to identify where to start, having a search strategy matters a lot. Then we have abstract screening. Then this is the first stage after you find, when you start finding the research, when your databases give you research studies and you download all the data that you have collected. Abstract screening and title screening is the first step that you follow in a literary search. Abstract screening can be done manually if the volume of your abstract screening is not really large, or if you're dealing with like thousands and thousands of titles and abstracts, then you may also use several automated web-based applications, or you might use several tools which are there for abstract screening, or some of them are even mobile-based apps, such as you have Ryan, which is a web-based as well as a mobile-based app. Then you have JBI Summary, which is a complete tool developed by the Joanna Briggs Institute, and so on. So it can be done manually in terms of using an Excel sheet and populating it, or it can be even done in terms of an automated search. Based on the funding that you have for research, you can choose what methodology will be followed for your search. Next comes the full text screening. Whether it is abstract screening or full text screening, in systematic review, it will be done by independent reviewers, mostly following a blind search, and they will populate the Excel sheets, or it might be, you might be using an automated methodology for this, but it will be done independently by two different reviewers to reduce bias. Then we come to the next stage of systematic review, which is data extraction. So data extraction is when we extract data from all the selected studies which are included, the titles and studies which were included after the full text screening. We will try and extract data which is relevant to answering the question posed in your systematic review, and present it in a standard format, such as we have Prisma. Prisma is a preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. It is a standard tool which is used to report systematic reviews to ensure quality of the report. Then next we come to data synthesis and interpretation. Synthesis basically is the process of bringing together data from set of included studies with the aim of drawing conclusions about body of evidence, like what evidence did you find about your research question. And the interpretation section of the systematic review, it will help the readers to interpret the main findings of the review brought together in the synthesis step. And then we have meta-analysis, as we had said, and presentation of findings and conclusions. Next, we will come to briefly understanding what is formulation of a research question. Now, I had mentioned a few tools that are used, such as the PICO or the PICOS. So developing a researchable question is one of the most challenging tasks a reviewer encounters when initiating a project. Both unanswered issues in current clinical practice, or when experiences dictate alternative therapies, it may provoke an investigator to formulate a clinical research question. Now, when we Define the question. There are a couple of important things. If the question is too narrow, it will produce a very narrow and very precise search, perhaps resulting in too few studies on which to base a review or be so focused that the results are not useful in wider clinical setting. So if your question is too narrow and too specific also, it will give rise to very poor outcome through the research. And using an overly narrow search also increases the chances of missing out important studies. Whereas at opposed to that, if you form a very broad question for research, say for example, we said benefits of ashwagandha to health, which is a very broad question. So you will get all kinds of mixed studies, which you may not be necessarily able to review systematically or conduct the meta-analysis on. And the results will be so heterogeneous that you will not be able to evaluate or synthesize them in the correct way. Therefore, from the outset, choices should be made about the remit of the review, which will in turn affect the search. Now, a number of frameworks can be used to break the question into concept. One such is the PICO. So population, intervention, comparison or control, and outcome. So what it does is it gives you a format. This is just a representation, but it is actually a questionnaire that you need to fill in so that you arrive at a precise research question. This methodology was formed by Richardson et al. In 1995. Which help to answer clinical questions such as effectiveness of a clinical intervention, etc. And it breaks the question into 4 components, that is population, intervention, comparison, and outcome, to facilitate identification of relevant information. Now, a well-formulated research question needs extreme specificity and preciseness, which guides the implementation of the project, keeping in mind the identification of variables and population of interest. While PICO method is used for mostly quantitative systematic reviews, PICOS is used when we are including S, which stands for study design, or we may use PICOT, where T stands for time period. So these are the 2 different variants which are included to be able to do different kinds of studies and not just quantitative systematic reviews by using PICOS. Now, PICOS itself requires a lot of training and practice to be able to use it, and it is so worth it if anyone is interested in conducting systematic reviews. Now, next, there are several web-based tools also for systematic reviews. Although I've shared the methodology of systematic review, in case of large-scale evaluation of data, like you get titles and abstracts in the number of thousands, and your inclusion criteria and the number of titles included is in the number of thousands in a large-scale systematic review, tools like JBI summary really help. There are other tools as well, such as Ryan QCRI, which is a free tool, web-based and mobile app-based tool, whereas JBI summary really requires subscription. Whether it is done through an institution or an independent scholar or group of scholars, it may require subscription. Summary stands for System for Unified Management, Assessment and Review Information. And it's a web-based software tool which requires subscription, and it's a complete package. So right from the selection of studies for inclusion to critical appraisal of included studies to data extraction and synthesis, everything can be done with the help of these tools, which makes it that much easier and more systematic to not just do the studies, speed up the studies, because systematic reviews can be very time consuming and labor intensive. So such tools are always very helpful when included and when we have the awareness of existence of such tools. Next is inclusion and exclusion criteria. Now, inclusion and exclusion criteria is basically everything, like, inclusion is everything which needs to be included. So as we exclude any irrelevant data related to the question which needs to be answered. And exclusion criteria are typically the factors which, if included, would make the study irrelevant or difficult to conclude. Now, a balance of specific inclusion and exclusion criteria is paramount. It's very important. For some systematic reviews, there may be already large pre-existing body of literature. The search strategy may retrieve like thousands of results that may be screened. And having a very explicit exclusion criteria from the beginning allows those conducting the screening process to have a very efficient workflow. For the final product, there should be a section in the review which is dedicated to characteristics of excluded studies, whenever, based on whatever it is. Like, we may base them out on date and exposure of interest, geographical location of the, in case you want to say, we gave example of ashwagandha in immunity. So whether if the location mattered, like you want to select studies which are only done in India or only done in a particular country or a particular continent, then geographical location, then language of abstract and the full text. If that is, you want to pre-decide that only articles published in English will be considered. Then participants, whether you want it to be very specific, that only male participants, only female participants, only children, etc. Then about peer review. Then reported outcomes, what was the setting of the study, whether it was done in a medical institute or it was done as a survey study, a community-based research, or what. Study design and type of publication which you want to include or exclude. So these are some of the pointers, based on which we want to decide the inclusion and exclusion criteria. Typically, whether it is related to your title and abstract screening or your full text screening, a reason needs to be specified when you exclude a study or say mark a no, that this study will not be included. You need to give a reason. And those reasons also need to be specified in the study design as to what will be the reason that you will cite for rejection of the particular study. Each of the reviewers who gives, and in case there is a conflict as to one study was included by one reviewer and excluded by the other, then there has to be a meeting between the two at all stages to be able to resolve such differences of opinion. And if they cannot resolve it, then a third reviewer is introduced who can help them resolve the conflict. Many a times, suppose you are not sure whether you want to include or exclude a study. You may want to contact the scholars of a particular publication, or the researchers who did a particular study about which you have questions, whether it will be included or excluded. That has to be done by the reviewers before they give a final say that yes, I want to include this study or I want to exclude. So that is the extent to which the depth is followed, or the depth to which a reviewer goes to be able to say for sure that yes, I want to include or exclude this study. Next, the different types of sources of data collection. Like, what are the different sources of data that you want to include in your studies? You may be including published articles or abstracts from different conferences. Errata, which is like a publication of any mistakes which were published by the journal, saying that there was a mistake in this article and they republished it, or they specified it, or any letters to the editor. Then trials registers across the world which are maintained by databases, clinical research reports, regulatory reviews, and individual participant data. So various, we can decide in the design of our study as to what is the kind of source of our data that we want to include in our studies. Say, for example, certain studies do not want abstract from conferences, or they do not want to take letters to the editor. So in your study design, you can decide as to what kind of data you will consider. Next, collection of data. Now, the first step in conducting literature search is to develop a proper search strategy. The search strategy will define as to how relevant your literature will be, and it should identify sources to be searched, the list of databases and trial registries, and what are the keywords that will be used. And the search strategy should be documented as an integral part of the systematic review protocol. And just as the rest of the well-conducted systematic review, the search strategy used needs to be very explicit and detailed, such that it can be reproduced using the same methodology with the exactly same results, or updated to a later time. This not only improves the reliability and accuracy of the review, but also means that if the review is replicated, the difference in reviewers should have very little effect, as they will use the identical search strategy. Now, when it comes to Ayurveda, there are certain databases which are very relevant to systematic reviews in Ayurveda, such as the Directory of Open Access Journals, DOAJ, or Dhara, which is digital helpline for Ayurveda research articles, or ABEAM, which is Annotated Bibliography of Indian Medicine. Then we have the Ayush Research Portal, and we have the conventional, such as the Cochrane Library and the PubMed, PubMed Central, Science Direct, Scopus, etc. So, and there are several. For example, Embase is also another database. Depending on what kind of data you want to collect, and the search strategy, what we determine, that will focus on what database will be searched for, because each database has areas which they focus. For example, some may focus only on RCTs, such as the Cochrane Central. Some are exclusively dedicated to psychology, nursing, physiotherapy, and so on, or like DOAJ, which focuses on alternative medicine, and Dhara, which gives exclusive Ayurveda research. So forming search terms and formats for entering such search terms in databases itself is a very important aspect of systematic reviews. There are specific methodologies which are followed to find relevant data in each of these databases, which itself is a large topic which requires training and understanding. Then once the data is collected, next we come to screening of abstracts and titles. Now, there are, as I mentioned, it can be either done manually by just using a plain simple Excel sheet, or we can use several very good tools which are out there, such as Ryan or Covidence or Colander or Abstractor. Out of this, for systematic reviews, the popular ones are Ryan and Covidence, which get used for automated title and abstract screening, which saves the reviewers a lot of time and also makes their systematic review a very smooth flowing process. The flow of the study is very smooth. Next, we have full text screening. Now, full text screening or abstract screening, as I said, is done by multiple reviewers to reduce bias. The way it is done is whether, when you did the abstract and title screening, whether the title meets your eligibility criteria or no. Typically, title and abstract screening are done together. They are done as a combined process. And based on your inclusion and exclusion criteria, it is further refined, and your Excel sheets or any of the tools that you are using are populated based on that. And then if you select a full text, the reviewers will individually, in a blinded way, review the full text. Again, say whether it is included or excluded from the study. You will be giving reasons for exclusion of the study, or suppose if it is unclear to you, you will seek further information from the authors if possible. And if everything is clarified and you are clear that you want to include the study, it will be included in the systematic review mapping. Then we go to the next most important phase, which is data extraction. Just like abstract and title screening, data extraction also can be done manually by using a simple old, good old, Excel sheet, or we can do it by using things like SRDR, Systematic Review Data Repository, which serves both as archive and a data extraction tool, or we can, based on the Prisma, that how we populate, how we want to populate our systematic review steps and how we want to extract the data. Based on that, we can use other things such as the Cochrane RevMan, or we can, which is developed by the George Washington University, or we can use Covidence, or we can use Distiller, etc., based on how we are, how much funds we have for our study. So any of these can be used for extracting the data. So the guidelines for extraction of data are, of course, driven by your research question and your search strategy, what you had employed, and also they are guided by the Prisma guidelines which are given, which we will come to. The templates which are offered by the Cochrane and supplementary sources, they are very standard, and because Cochrane itself is a website which will which hosts most of the systematic reviews and meta-analysis studies done across the world. Their guidelines are pretty straightforward and very stringent, which will ensure a very high quality study. Then the helpful data which we use, it may be in a study, it may be like, say, study authors, years of publication, title, the date of the date of exception, then demographies such as age, sex, then ethnicity. or geographical location of the sample which was studied, then what conditions and other characteristics related to the intervention and outcome. Or it can be methodology such as study type, participant recruitment, selection, allocation, level of evidence, study quality. Or it could be regarding your intervention such as quantity of the drug use, dosage, route of administration, format, duration, what time frame it was given for, and what was the setting in which it was given. Or it could be about outcomes, which could be either qualitative or quantitative. Then next is the data interpretation and synthesis, and the study reporting, of course. So before we start synthesizing the data, we need to populate the Prisma flow. So the Prisma flow basically helps to, it consists of a checklist of about 27 items, which help us to assess the quality of each element of the systematic review. And it, it also guides the authors when they are reporting their findings. So Prisma, of course, like, this is a standard Prisma which is followed. When it comes to Ayurveda and when it comes to randomized controlled trials in Ayurveda or any research studies or any clinical studies in Ayurveda, there have been continuous efforts which have been made to try and modify the Prisma to Ayurveda. For example, some time ago, there was a conference, I think in 2015, which tried to modify the Prisma or set guidelines for using Prisma for Ayurveda systematic reviews. And it was also recommended that the guidelines for Prisma for traditional Chinese medicine and evaluation of herbs can also be applied to Ayurveda. So because the type of clinical studies in Ayurveda can be so diverse, still there are, I think, continued efforts to modify Prisma so that we can create high quality systematic reviews in Ayurveda as well. So Prisma consists, a checklist, as you see here, which needs to be populated based on, which studies are included and their eligibility and their screening and identification. This needs to be populated. Then we come to meta-analysis. So meta-analysis, it helps to improve, the precision of the findings, and it is a statistical analysis. And many a times it also helps us to answer questions which were not posed by individual studies, and to settle controversies arising from conflicting studies, and a very powerful statistical tool to be able to come to a point of truth which we are trying to seek, the evidence which we are trying to seek through the systematic review. And as I've said before, meta-analysis may or may not be a part of systematic review, but meta-analysis is always done in conjunction with a systematic review. Then importance, the most important thing is why do we want systematic reviews in Ayurveda? We publish so many articles, research articles in Ayurveda, and we are trying to do good quality randomized controlled trials. Isn't that sufficient? Why systematic reviews? So let me tell you, Ayurveda lags way behind when it comes to published research studies in the field of the highest quality research, that is systematic review and meta-analysis. In Cochrane Library or Cochrane Central, which lists out almost 8,000 systematic reviews, Ayurveda has just one, whereas I think homeopathy and naturopathy have 5 and 6. We have just one. That shows us how far behind we are in the area of evidence-based practice. So bridging the gap between evidence-based practice and Ayurveda is very important, and it is the goal towards which associations like CAR are working towards, if I'm putting this in the right words. Then efforts need to be done to boost credibility. For example, the Clinical Trial Registry of India said that use of Ayurveda medicine has increased exponentially worldwide due to the cost as well as consumer preferences. In another study which was published in 2008 in Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, it showed that 59% of population in the US uses Ayurveda medicines and is aware of Ayurveda. Helping translate this public literacy in terms of awareness about, and in this awareness about Ayurveda, into a legally accepted system of healthcare in not just US, but in other countries will require more than just awareness. We need credible, high quality publications such as systematic review, which will act like propellers for our science to propel it into the scientific community in the right direction. It will help us to conduct more meaningful research in Ayurveda, which is definitely the need of the hour. So thank you so much, Council for Ayurveda Research. Thank you so much, Asavari, for having me. It was a wonderful session, and I feel glad that I was able to address this very important topic today in today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Chaitali. It was absolutely amazing webinar. Excellent presentation. It is so much important. This topic is so important. This is really, not many people are aware what is going on and how the research needs to be done and what is available regarding Ayurveda. So absolutely, this will be so much helpful and beneficial for all the viewers, Ayurvedic doctors, Ayurvedic students, researchers who are trying to learn about Ayurveda and how to propagate, as well as for licensing of Ayurveda here in the United States, as well as in other countries where it is not still licensed. And it is not
absolutely
as a as evidence-based, medicine. So
absolutely,
so helpful.
Yes. See, policies and legislators do not depend on, how emotionally people are connected to Ayurveda. They are not driven, policies are not driven by belief of people or belief of our community in our science. Many a times we get the answer as to, no, why do you want randomized control trials? They don't fit within the framework of individualized medicine or personal medicine that Ayurveda is. Personal preventive medicine is the term that is being used currently for Ayurveda, Yes, absolutely. 100% we agree with you that, maybe Ayurveda doesn't fit into the reductionist framework of our cities. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to present our science in a very systematic method or in an evidence-driven method. So, we can't hide behind the garb that, we believe in Ayurveda and our science is great and it has been there from thousands of years. What about developing that science further? Are we going to simply rely on what was developed by our scholars and by our rishis in the past and stop at that? Or are we, as present generation, we make our own contributions to it and develop it further? That is a very big question, whether we stagnate or we move ahead. And I think in that area, CAR is has taken a wonderful initiative in that field. And, I absolutely appreciate and wish all the best to all the initiatives which are being taken by CAR for this very fact.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was absolutely wonderful, very systematic, very in-depth. And this will be a great start for everyone to know about the research steps as well as what is available regarding Ayurveda.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Asavari. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. Thank you all the viewers, everybody who joined us live. And this recording will be available on our CAR website on the YouTube channel. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you will be able to view this recording as well as the further, all the webinars. So thank you.
Thank you.